Hola clase, es tiempo de empezar con hacer cosas nuevas y muy interesantes, eh? Time to do some new, fun, and interesting things. We're going to be working on Spanish 1, Grammar 1.2 today, asking and answering age, asking and answering origin, and a few other small items sort of intermixed as well. There's a lot of new vocabulary. There's some new numbers, so let's go ahead and get right to it. I'm going to get out of this program very quickly here so I can show you our vocab sheet. First of all, if you have any questions on this, feel free to email me and or come on up to me first thing on Monday in school or whatever week we're working on this particular chapter, and I can help you out. It's my goal to get as many questions out of the way as I possibly can before even getting too deep into the material so that we can maximize our learning time during class. So that being said, let's go ahead and get started right now. Español 1, capítulo 1, paso 2, section 1.2 if we're speaking in English. Asking and saying how old someone is. First question phrase is ¿Cuántos años tiene él? Or ¿Cuántos años tiene ella? So ¿Cuántos años tiene él? Asks how old is he? ¿Cuántos años tiene ella? Is how old is she? You may notice that ¿Cuántos? Doesn't really ask how. And años doesn't mean old, and tiene doesn't really mean is. This actually asks how many years does he or she have, okay? So the tiene means he or she has, the años is years, and the cuantos means how many. One thing you'll notice in Spanish that there's a big difference between literal translations and general translations. So we will continue to revisit this idea throughout the course of the year. You'll get used to it as we progress. This exists no matter what language you're learning, whether it be Latin or French or German or any Eastern languages as well. Big difference between general and literal translations. We have to sort of clean things up a little bit as we progress. So, not to get too bogged down, ¿Cuántos años tiene él? How old is he? ¿Cuántos años tiene ella? How old is she? ¿Cuántos años tienes? How old are you? El número is just the word for number. The number. Tengo años isn't really one phrase altogether. The three little dots here denote that there should be a number in there. Like, for example, I'm 41 years old, so I would say tengo 41 años. If you want to say, for example, she's 10 years old, you'd say ella tiene 10 años. If I wanted to, for example, say I am 15 years old, I'd say tengo 15 años. I have 15 years. She has 10 years, and so on and so forth. So again, the difference between the literal and the general translation. So if I want to say he's 10 years old, it'd be él tiene 10 años. If I want to say she's 10 years old, it'd be ella tiene 10 años. Continuing on. ¿De dónde eres? Asks, where are you from? ¿De dónde es? Asks, where is he or she from? So, for example, ¿de dónde es él? Where is he from? ¿De dónde es ella? Where is she from? Es de means he or she is from. So if I want to say he is from Saginaw, I'd say él es de Saginaw. If I want to say she is from Saginaw, it would be ella es de Saginaw. Ser means to be. And we're going to talk a little bit about more how we manipulate that word in order to create different sentences and turn it into sentences. We have to change the word ser using a process called conjugation. We're going to talk a little bit more about conjugation in a few minutes here. One example of conjugation is the word es. Another example of conjugation is the verb soy. And incidentally, this next phrase means I am from. So if I wanted to say, for example, I am from Michigan, it would be soy de Michigan. Fairly straightforward. Down here in this section of your vocab sheet, you will have numbers. Now, we've already done numbers, but just as a quick reminder, uno, 1, dos, 2, tres, 3, cuatro, 4, cinco, 5. And I'm going to pause right there for a second. If you know your numbers beautifully all the way through 30, feel free to skip ahead about a minute or so in this video so you can get on to the next section. But for the rest of us that need a little bit of a reminder, we'll go ahead and continue. 6, 7, 8, nueve, 9, 10, 10, 11, 11, 12, 12, 13, 13, 14, 14, 15, 15, 16, 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20, 20, 21, 21, 22, 22, 23, 23, 24, 24, 25, 25, 26, 26, 27, 27, 28, 28, 29, 29, and 30 is 30. Fairly straightforward numbers 1 through 30. Okay, moving on to some of the specific grammar points for this chapter. We'll go ahead and take a look at Spanish 1 Grammar 1.2. I mentioned earlier that we're going to be doing some conjugating with the verb ser, conjugating the verb ser. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at that real quick. And when conjugating the verb ser, first thing you probably have to understand is what really conjugating is. Conjugating is simply taking a verb and giving it a subject. And sometimes we have to change the spelling of that word in the process. And so this is our first example of that. So going through these bullet points here, the words soy, eres, and es are all forms of the verb ser, which is to say they're conjugations of the verb ser, which is one way to say to be in Spanish. Ser means to be. When talking about where someone is from, like their origin, use a form of the verb ser in your sentence and then the word de afterwards. So forms of ser will always be used when you're talking about where you're from. A few examples of this are soy, which means I am. So a conjugation of ser that means I am is soy, yo soy. Eres means you are. It's a conjugation of tu for ser. And then es can mean either he or she is. So él es is he is. Ella es is she is. One thing that you'll note in Spanish is that we don't always use subject pronouns as often as we say them in English. In English, we almost always say I am, you are, he or she is. And every one of those small sentences, I use the words I, you, he, or she. In Spanish, it's not as necessary. Saying the word soy already means I am. Saying the word eres always already contains the meaning you, as in you are. Sometimes you might have to specify él es versus ella es if that isn't already a part of your conversation or already understood from a previous sentence. We'll dip more into that into class. Just doing some presenting at this point. Next item on the agenda is forming some questions with some question words. So the question words como, cuántos, and de dónde are some question words that we'll work with in this chapter. Let me move me up for a moment here. There I go. Okay. So far you've asked questions using several different words like ¿Cómo estás? Meaning how are you? ¿Cómo te llamas? What's your name? ¿Cuántos años tienes? How old are you? ¿De dónde eres? Where are you from? So those are just some examples of some question phrases and some question words that we've used so far in the last couple chapters. To ask questions like these, you put the question word at the beginning of a sentence, and notice that all these question words have an accent somewhere. Como has an accent. Como has an accent. ¿Cuántos has an accent. ¿De dónde, which is considered a compound question phrase, again, has an accent. So whenever you're asking questions using a question word, it'll always have an accent. That doesn't mean that all accented words are questions, but it does mean that all question words are accented. Something we'll build on as we progress. Also notice that the question word como can mean either how or what. See right here it says, how are you? ¿Cómo estás? But down here it says, ¿Cómo te llamas? And that kind of translated to what is your name? So there's a difference there, right? So it can mean how or what, depending on the context of the question. So does this tell you anything about translating? Just trying to get you to play with that idea. We'll play with that idea a little bit more in class. But again, going back to, and I know that I sound like a broken record on this, there is a big difference between the literal word-for-word translation versus the general meaning, the idea that we're trying to convey. And so hopefully that's a theme that you'll get more comfortable with as we progress. That actually is a very short chapter in terms of presentation. We'll do a little bit more and get a little bit more involved in that in our next lesson. But I would like to remind you that we are entertaining questions either via email. So if you email, I have not yet gotten to the process where I am chatting on YouTube. So if you were to say comment on this video, have not yet gotten so far that I'm answering comments to the actual videos themselves within YouTube. So so just a heads up on that. Other than that, I hope that this has been very educational for you. The idea is to make it so that you have more access to the language, and that you, as parents who may be watching at home, can practice pronouncing things with your students and maybe help them through the process a little bit if they're a little confused about anything. And keep on learning. We hope you're having a great beginning to the school year, and we'll see you soon. Ciao, hasta luego, y adios.